Hello viewers, this is your SSK and today we have an interesting story from Chandamama and the name of the story is The Third Bridegroom. Mantrapala was king of Amaravati and Chandramati was his queen. They had a very beautiful daughter named Haima. The king and queen wished that Haima should become the wife of Jayabrada, prince of Maniprastha. Jaya was the seventh son and had no right to his father's throne, but it was predicted that he would become a monarch. He belonged to a distinguished family and was a highly desirable young man. But the hopes of Haima's parents were dashed to pieces while sending messengers to various countries in search of bride of Jaya. His father ignored Amaravati altogether. Ah, well, said Mantrapala, evidently we are not good enough for them. He instituted a search for likely young men to marry his daughter. He found only two. One was the prince of Kalinga named Gunavarma and the other prince of Lalat named Dhanavarma. While the former was virtually bankrupt, the latter was almost illiterate, and the king had to choose between them. Even with so little choice, Haima's parents managed to disagree with each other. The king preferred the educated Gunavarma while the queen fancied the moneyed Dhanavarma. The king being the final arbiter, he fixed up Haima's marriage with the Gunavarma and started preparations for it. The queen, who was equally determined to marry her daughter to a man of her own choice, sent word to Lalat instructing Dhanavarma to come for marriage secretly and silently. Thus, while Gunavarma arrived with a lot of fanfare and lodged in the royal's guest house, his rival Dhanavarma arrived silently with a small ritual and put up in a common cowlry. Haima was pleasantly decorated in her bridal costume. The auspicious moment was at hand. The queen approached Haima and told her, "My darling, if you want to be happily married to us, I tell you, sit in a basket and I shall send you to right bridegroom. If not, you will be tied up with that pauper Gunavarma." Believing that her mother knew best, Haima agreed to be carried off secretly in a basket. The basket in which she sat was covered with a cloth, and a palace maid took the basket on her head. Haima could not only breathe freely through the chinks in the basket, but she could also see everything. The maid was well known to the guards of the palace, and no one obstructed her. Only when she was almost arrived at her destination did trouble occur. On account of carelessness of the new occupants of Chowdhury, the houses in the neighborhood caught fire and the entire palace was pandemonium. The road was littered with things removed from the burning houses. People were running and shouting. The palace maid tried her best to make her way through the various articles and furnishing lying peel mode on the road. But someone held her up, calling her thief, and made her put down the basket. Resisting was dangerous and maid sneaked away, leaving Haima in the basket among the things on the road. Presently, a number of well-dressed men came along riding on horses. They calmly loaded their horses with whatever caught their eye. One of them took the baskets in which Haima was hiding. Then they departed like lords. These were real robbers, but no one thought of holding them up. These robbers rode till dawn and arrived in the thickest part of the jungle. They got down their food from the backs of the horses and began to divide it. The robber who took the basket thought that it could contain either flour or fruit, and he did not care to take it down from the horse. Having nobody to mind him, the horse carrying Haima wandered away in search of food. At one place, the basket tilted and fell down. By the time Haima came out of the basket, there was nothing but wilderness all about her. The robbers were left far behind. Even the horse had disappeared. Tormented by hunger and thirst, not knowing whither she went, Haima began to walk endlessly along the jungle footpaths. Suddenly, a fierce tiger came from behind a bush and stopped. Haima gave a frightened shriek and closed her eyes. She saw a face more frightening than that of tiger. It was the face of a tribeman who had saved Haima from the tiger just at the nick of the moment. Though his face was ugly, he had a heart of gold. Lady, said the tribesman, this is no place for you. Soon it will be dark and tigers will come prowling. Spend this night under my roof and I shall get you out of this forest tomorrow morning. In his anxiety of Haima's safety, the poor fool forgot the tiger he had killed. The moment his wife set eyes upon Haima, she was enraged and asked, where did you find this bride? The unhappy husband told her truthfully what all had happened, but the wife was not convinced. Why didn't he bring home the tiger after killing it? She fell upon her husband in a great rage, tore his hair, scratched his face, kicked him, and went crying to her own people. Her people came to settle the dispute and finally gave their verdict. Since you have not brought this woman for your own pleasure, and since she is cause of dispute between you both, let us take her away and throw her into a deep well. The tribesman was sorry for this decision, but if he objected to it, his wife's people were sure to kill him for trying to get another wife. The mediator carried Haima to a deep and depleted well in thick of forest and threw her in it. But Haima was not fated to die in it. She found some branches growing out of the walls of this well and clung to them till daybreak. Next morning, someone happened to look into this well and found Haima in it. This person was none other than Jaya, the seventh son of the king of Maniprastha. He had come to this forest the previous day on a hunting expedition. In his enthusiasm for the chase, he lost trace of his followers and kept wandering in the forest in search of water. Now he found not only water but also a strange beautiful girl looking like a bride and yet dying of starvation and exposure so far away from home. Jaya learned Haima's story after saving her from the well. He sat her on his horse and started in search of a village. They managed to reach one by nightfall. They went to a chowdhury, cooked for themselves some food, and lay down to sleep. The same day, some Brahman travelers from Amaravati arrived at that village. That night, they lay down on pile of the chowdhury to sleep. From their talk, Haima learned to be happened at Amaravati. The king had come to know that queen had tried to marry off Haima secretly. A search was made for Haima, and when she was not found, both the bridegrooms accused Haima's parents of having played a practical joke, threw them in the gaol, and took charge of the state. Haima began to weep for her unhappy parents. Do not worry about your parents, Jaya consoled her. I shall somehow hoodwink Gunavarma and Dhanvarma and liberate your father and mother. Only tell me which one of them would you like to for husband. I don't want any one of those rascals, Haima replied so vehemently that Jaya did not pursue the subject further. Next day they started for Amaravati, breaking their journey in the evenings at one village or other. For expenses, Haima sold her ornaments one after another. Taking advantage of the needs of the sellers, the buyers offered very low prices, but they paid very dearly for it quite soon. For the king's men who were still searching for Princess Haima came to these villages, identified her ornaments, arrested the merchants who had brought them and marched them off to Amaravati. On reaching Amaravati, Jaya disguised Haima and lodged her in a safe place. Then he went to court and made the acquaintance of Gunavarma and Dhanavarma. He soon got into their confidence. It looked to me, Jaya one day said to Dhanavarma, that you are still looking for Princess Haima. If only I had 1,000 rupees, I could show you where she is. Take 2,000 if you want, but where is she? Dhanavarma asked anxiously. Don't you know that Gunavarma is hiding her from you? Jaya asked him. Can you prove it? Dhanavarma said. This very night, said Jaya. He made a similar offer to Gunavarma after convincing him that Dhanavarma had Haima in his possession. Then he went into the city and hired for himself a big mansion into which he shifted Haima. He let her remove her disguise and instructed her to light up the entire house and keep awake for him late into the night. Then he sent word to Dhanavarma to come to such and such place at 10 o'clock in the night and to Gunavarma to come an hour later. At the appointed hour, Dhanavarma arrived and met Jaya. Where is Gunavarma? He asked. You shall see him when he comes, Jaya said. First have a look at the princess. Jaya then took him to a window and showed him Haima inside. From the portrait he was carrying, Dhanavarma could identify her easily. Then Jaya took him to the other side of the mansion and they entered through a side door. They came into a passage with two rooms on the side of it. Wait in the first room, you will be able to see Gunavarma as he goes in, Jaya said. Dhanavarma entered the first room and waited. Soon Gunavarma also arrived. Jaya showed Haima to him and then told him to wait in second room on the passage so that Dhanavarma could see him as he went past the room first. Jaya met Dhanavarma and asked him whether he was satisfied. Then he asked him to leave the house by the other end of the passage. When Dhanavarma passed the second room, Gunavarma said him and was convinced that Dhanavarma had been playing a dirty trick on him all this time. Both Dhanavarma and Gunavarma were now deadly enemies, thirsting for vengeance. When they came to court next day, they embraced each other as usual, but stabbed each other in back and died on the spot. Jaya at once ordered the release of king and queen as well as the merchants who were imprisoned for being in possession of Haima's ornaments. The original wish of king and queen was fulfilled, and Haima, who was in love with her rescuer, became Jaya's wife after all.